for showing up. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to STIR Crazy Month 2025 and this week's panel, which is the insurance panel, sponsored by Guesty and Proper Insurance. I'm sorry we're a little bit late. We did actually click the button and we started, and we were all into some good conversation there before we realized we weren't live. So sorry for being a little bit late. I'm glad you can join us now. So I will do the intro again for everybody here on the panel. My name is Mike Bayer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Vacation Rental Formula Business School. We have a fantastic group here today, and Heather will be introducing everybody in a moment. If you are a registered attendee, actually, let's start with if you're not yet a registered attendee for STIR Crazy Month, you can go to vacationrentalformula.com/SSTIR and become an attendee. It's absolutely free. It gives you access to our event app where you'll be able to earn points towards winning 2 VIP tickets to the VR Nation conference in Austin, Texas on April 27th and 28th. You've got to be in it to win it. So ensure that you get registered, get on the app. And speaking of which, right now, if you are in the app and you go to the gamification section, you can actually click on the QR code for the challenge for the insurance panel challenge, and you can go in there and you can click on this QR code to get you an extra 200 points. And as well as that, we also have our Easter eggs, which we're hiding in content throughout STIR Crazy Month. For this panel, the Easter egg is number 8, and the answer to the question is policy. And that'll give you another 200 points. So 400 points right there to battle in our leaderboard and have that chance of winning those 2 VIP tickets. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Heather. And thank you once again all for being here. Just a reminder, if you have comments or questions, whatever platform you're listening on, whether it be on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on YouTube, you can go into the comments and I will hand those over to the panel who will answer them live. And if you're watching the replays, we'll get back to you as quick as we can with any questions that you might have. So with that being said, it's over to Heather.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for that handover. So welcome everybody to Insurance Week of STIR Crazy Month. We've already done Trust Week, we've done Safety Week, and now really excited to get into Insurance Week, and we will take it straight away with the introductions to our panel. And we have today Nick Massey from Proper Insurance. Nick is a regular on our podcast. I don't know how many times you've been on the podcast, Nick, but you're on again tomorrow.
A couple times. Yeah, pleasure to be here and dive deeper into this situation with our Stay-Wise rentals and helping through and navigate some of these challenges that you can use insurance to help leverage.
Brilliant. We also have Jackie Backman from Wavo. Welcome, Jackie. Jackie, did we meet? Were you at in Vermont? Did we meet there?
We definitely met. I don't think it was Vermont, but we met at another show.
All right.
I remember your lovely accent and you just being
I
lovely.
remember your face. I remember your face. So welcome. We'll be talking about damage waivers as we go through this this conversation about Stay-Wise rentals. So we will hear a lot from you, I'm sure. And a huge welcome to Madi Johnson from For the Love of Upstate. Maddie, Mike's introduced me to your TikTok channel. It's just phenomenal. Maddie has a property management company. She's a realtor. She's a short-term rental expert. She also has experience of insurance and making a claim. So we wanted to make sure that in this discussion of insurance, we have somebody that has had an issue and can share that experience. So as Nick said, we're talking about the issue that faced Stay-Wise Rentals, our lovely property management company that is dealing with about 10 years worth of problems in our 5 weeks of the STIR Crazy event. So we've already had a trust issue. We've already had a big safety issue last week. But this week's issue, out of the blue, they had a call to let them know that the people occupying one of their properties, which was meant to be a small group, a small family group, actually turned out to be a party. And the reports were of over 30 people around the pool and the hot tub. There was considerable amounts of damage, and in the aftermath, when they went to check on their insurance, they found that their coverage was limited. So we're going to be talking about accidents, or not accidents. We're going to be talking about disaster proofing your business and how to ready your business for the disasters that may happen, that may occur. I know this from 20 years in the property management business, that disasters do occur, and having hindsight about them is really no good. But I want to kick off with this, and I mentioned this to the panel when we were chatting in the green room before, just about a Facebook post I saw recently in a group, and the question was, where can I find the cheapest insurance? And of course, the keyboard experts jumped in and all offered their expert, we have expert in quotes, advice on where they could find the cheapest insurance. And there was one lone voice, and a person said, this is not the question you should be asking. You should be asking, where can I get the best insurance? And I think this is something that we're going to be talking about, because Sarah and Mike with Staywise Rentals, they didn't have the best insurance. And this is where they fell into quite a hefty cash-related incident, because this is costing them way, way more money than it would have done if they'd had good coverage. So I want to kick off this with a question that I'm sure Maddie can jump in on, but it's the importance of independent insurance. Let's start with that, because in that Facebook post, people were saying, well, Airbnb offer insurance, so you don't need to get any. That I forgot to mention that when we were talking in the green room, that somebody said, oh, no, you don't need insurance because if you go through Airbnb, because you'll have everything there. So why is it crucial for everybody who owns a short-term rental property to have independent insurance in addition to whatever the OTA covers? And I definitely want to hear from Nick on this, and from Maddie, because you're an owner.
Take it away, Maddie.
I was going to say, I'm not an insurance expert, but I've been lucky enough to be introduced to proper very early on. And there are so many things that air cover doesn't cover. And when we had our property, we had a huge pipe burst and there was water everywhere. And it was I think it was close to a 6-figure claim. Air cover doesn't cover that. There was no guest there. It wasn't during a reservation. So it was just absolutely vital. I can't imagine the stress of owning a property and not having excellent insurance to go on with it.
Yeah, I think a big part of this is when we look at the dynamic between an individual homeowner who's contracting with Staywise Vacation Rentals, who Staywise has a direct booking platform. They also probably use these OTAs and have been using the OTAs, that there's a false sense of security through the owner on who insures what. And that's where a lot of this confusion begins. So the property manager needs to have insurance. Yes, Staywise needs to have their own product that covers their general liability, their professional liability. If they have staff and team members, commercial auto, their office building, all of that stuff. But one thing that's commonly missed with a property manager is not fully understanding that coverage doesn't actually extend to properties under management. So now the property owner needs to make sure that they have the right insurance. So to Maddie's example, that's where these quote unquote cheap insurance products outside of a booking can still deny these claims due to business activity exclusion. So it's really important for the property manager to guide the homeowner or recommend the homeowner to somebody, and the homeowner to do their own research and make sure that they have the right coverage in place as well.
It's interesting, Maddie, that you say the incident that happened with you, there weren't any guests there. It was outside your normal business, yet I'm no doubt it affected your business operations.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was right after we closed on the property. So we had just started renovations. There was no furniture, like we were just getting ready to go live. So there was no Airbnb booking tied to what happened. And I think the best part for that was, even though we weren't live yet, Proper still covered the delay in which we went live. So I think it's so much more than like fixing the water damage. It was like a huge positive impact for my investor on his property, because I think it delayed us 3 to 6 months almost.
So if you had just a homeowner's policy, it would have probably covered the rectification of that damage, but it wouldn't have covered that business income that was lost.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was something I wasn't expecting. Like, I think Proper asked me, like, how much revenue would you have made if you launched on time? I was like, well, let me go to AirDNA and like look to see what that would be. And I was so surprised and also like very relieved to be able to give some good news to the client and the investor, rather than just saying like, hey, your pipes are burst is going to cost this much and you've lost out on like this much revenue from the delay in opening.
Wow. Yeah. I had a similar incident in my property in Canada many years ago when I first bought it, and we had a pipe burst. And we did not have that business income coverage. So that took, because it happened in the middle of winter, and there was no way of getting anybody in to deal with that, because they had to dig up pipes outside. And yes, we lost income. We didn't have that. So that's really great to know that that's there. But let's step back a little bit to StayWise. And the sort of common scenarios that are out there, like these unauthorized events or property misuse, where OTA coverage might fall short. How can insurance and waivers as well, because I want to bring Jackie in on this, how can they fill those gaps?
Yeah, so for starters, on our part, just from the standard insurance part, and then the hand off to Jackie on the waiver side, one of the biggest things that we get as a concern when a client comes in, the first thing is guest caused damage. And then the second big concern is typically liability. And so one thing that's unique about Proper, and we're not the only one that does this, there's companies that put in some, facet of protection for guest caused damage from vandalism and intentional acts, but you always have a deductible, right? So that's where the supplemental protections come in. And honestly, that's why air cover exists. I mean, they identified years ago that there was a gap in the standard insurance markets on guest caused damage. So they come in with their supplemental protection for damage caused by guests. It does pay sometimes it doesn't. We get a mix of everything on our side. But let's say StayWise's homeowner in this case, where there's guest caused damage, has a $5,000 deductible through Proper Insurance or their other policy. If that damage doesn't exceed $5,000, there's no response on that primary home policy. And then what if air cover, or worse yet, it wasn't even through Airbnb, it was a direct booking? That's where a damage waiver policy in place, like what Wavo offers, really comes into play. And kind of let Jackie touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, the damage waiver is a great solution, especially if you're kind of over taking a security deposit. Everybody knows security deposits are pretty cumbersome. It's an admin burden. It's a headache. Eventually, God forbid, when there is guest damage, there's that inevitable awkward conversation with the guest. Hey, you're not getting your security deposit back. And instead of them leaving with memories of a great vacation, they have maybe a not so great taste in their mouth because they had to deal with this damage. And what's great about Wavo, and there's others out there like us, but what's great about Wavo is that we don't get the guests involved at any point. And so you can come to us directly with whatever damage that happened, that occurred, but never once will we go after the guest. We'll never ask you, the host, to go after the guest. we just leave the guest out of it. We cover your damage. We send you that ACH reimbursement within 2 business days, and you're off and running, and everybody's happy. The guest is happy, you're happy, we're happy, and we just keep it simple.
I remember in my role as a property manager for years and years, we had that typical damage deposit.
Yeah.
Where the guest would send a check and we'd hold it. And then if there was a claim by the owner or at the end of the stay, that's when the fun started.
Yeah.
Because, nobody wanted to phone the guest. Nobody wanted to tell the owner that the guest was denying any responsibility. And it was so much he said, she said, and it was so challenging. And when we eventually went the damage waiver route, it was like this massive load had been lifted from our shoulders.
Absolutely. And with air cover, not to knock air cover, but there is that element of, well, shoot, first we have to go and get the guests involved. We have to have them own up to it, otherwise they're not going to pay. And then that's a whole process in and of itself. And so, Wavo's great to kind of alleviate that stress. And then also when you do branch out and start taking direct bookings, we're there to kind of cover that exposure for you.
Jackie, I love what you said about instead of the guest leaving with like happy memories, they're left with this like taste in their mouth. Like the host charged me for something. And we had a pretty big influencer organically book one of our properties. And I was like so excited, scrolling through all of her videos. And I saw a comment that said, like, my mom and I stayed here and they charged us for like a table that we broke. And my heart just like sank. Yeah. So I think it's so important, especially if you're building a brand as well. Like you don't want to be known as this person who's always like charging their guests for damaging things.
Yep. And at the same time, it's like you shouldn't have to eat that cost yourself. So it's like, where do we draw the line? Here comes the damage waiver. It's a great solution for that.
It plays a big role in, like when we really look at combining everything that we've done through Stir Crazy and starting last year and moving in and evolving into this year, trust wasn't hit until the 3rd week. Trust was number 1 this week. And I think when you look at the trust components of a growing property management entity, especially in a destination area, you look at the safety components that were talked about last week, and we talked about insurance. Not just making sure the homeowner has the right insurance, but also these damage waivers plays a big role in trust on both the property owner side and the guest and traveler side for your clients. Because one, you're building that trust with your owner when you do a damage waiver saying, look, we have these damage waivers per booking that cover the first $1, $2, $5, $10, $20,000 in damage from a guest, and then we recommend you go and get XYZ insurance on your property as well. We also relay that to the guest as well, and that's what I really love about the damage waiver products, especially Wavo, because I go back to my own situation traveling in Red Lodge, Montana with my wife on our anniversary a couple years back. I booked from a property manager that actually works with proper insurance, and they took a security deposit. I wasn't excited about it, but it was the only place available on a 4th of July weekend. And when I walked into the condo, I opened up the window sash and it fell off into the bush outside. And so called the property manager, told him what happened. And when I left, they hit my security deposit over it. And I'll never book with them ever again. I just won't. They have lost my trust as a traveler to go to one of their properties, and I only look for damage waivers included in my bookings now, and solely on the basis that whether I'm not a malicious person, but if I accidentally damage something, I know there's not going to be that awkward or distrustful interaction of pointing fingers. It's just like, hey, it's fine, it broke, we got it taken care of, we move on with life.
Yeah, those are all great comments. I'm going to step back a little bit once again to STAYWISE and just talk about how they could have reduced the likelihood of this event. What sort of proactive measures could they have taken to prevent this from happening?
I think for starters, there's a lot of technology out there that you can't necessarily disaster proof your business, but you can become disaster resistant. or better prepared or ready for when something happens. So if you've been in the industry long enough, you've heard the likes of NoiseAware and Minute. There's a new company that I'm really fond of called Dwellwell that do these noise monitorings. STIR is another one, I can't forget to drop them, that help track people who are connected to your Wi-Fi router. So you can kind of see, like, this is supposed to be 6 people, and now there's 40 devices connected to my Wi-Fi. Or there's an increased level of noise going on through my decibel monitor. So you can work on preventing, hopefully, the large-scale damages from happening. You're still going to end up having damage at that point once it picks up the excessive noise, or if it's got water pucks or things like that. There's already water damage happening. You're just preventing it, hopefully, from going further. And so that helps you reduce the overall financial impact and shutdown time, like back to Maddie's situation. Granted, they're in the renovation period, but they were actively running and up and running, and they were doing a turnover, and now the water puck is sensing water instead of a potentially 6-figure claim and 4 or 5 months shut down. We're talking a few $1,000s of water damage and maybe shut down for a week or two. Now you still have a claim, you still need to engage with insurance, but you're able to get back up and running much quicker because you're a little less prone to major disaster from happening.
Yeah, I'm a great advocate of water sensors now. We had an issue in our RV last year where I opened the underbelly. For anybody who knows RVs, it's the big pass-through area that's sort of underneath the bedroom and a fifth wheel. And I opened that to 2 inches of water inside. Ooh. And the water pump had been leaking, and we had no clue. And a water sensor would have sensed that, and it would have sensed my issue years and years ago in my property, and with yours as well, Maddie. So yes, water sensors are just not an expensive piece of equipment, but can save masses and masses of money.
And Maddie, maybe you could touch us on this a little bit in your business. So we talk to a lot of folks who go, well, I vet my guests so good, and I do this, and I use this service, and I do IDs and all of these things. But I've always been under the opinion that if your risk management strategy is set up correctly, you don't have to put that additional burden on yourself. Yes, vetting guests is important, but I mean, we hear stories of very well-to-do individuals who pass the check, but then they end up leaving a property in great disarray. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that guest verification or background check side of things.
Yeah, I just don't know if, like, I think there's accidental damage and there's damage like throwing a pool party when having 40 people there. And I don't think you can tell what kind of person someone is through like the Airbnb app or through whatever like verification process you have. I think accidents happen, so why not be protected against all accidents versus like bringing it down to like the individual level? I just don't know if there's any way to tell, like, Nick, you know, the window fell off, or like I book a property and something breaks. It's not because of who I am as a person. It's just because stuff happens sometimes.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. So I want to talk about this this Facebook post, because STAYWISE went, let's say they didn't go for the best. They had some coverage, but when they really looked into their coverage, it really wasn't enough to cover the amount of damage that had happened. And the insurance company was also questioning a lot of things about their rental process as well, and how they were able to how anybody was able to bring in 40 people and do all this damage anyway. So let's talk about sticker shock, because that's what we hear all the time. This is going to cost me a lot, and I think, you know, buying insurance is like buying a product that you can't ever see does anything for you until something bad happens, and nobody wants to think about the things that are going to happen that are bad. So how do you approach that, Nick, when if you had seen that Facebook post and you were able to comment on it, what would you have said?
Yeah, I do my best to stay out of those threads. Usually the actual experts in the social media space are not well regarded in the comment section. So for my own personal sanity, but like you typically, we always hit sticker shock in our business, we're typically more expensive. You know, Maddie can attest to more of that. But the proof is definitely in the pudding, if you will, on what is covered. I think the big thing that is the problem is anytime you get a quote from the retail insurance market, let's call it, you're effectively getting a proposal that's 2 pages that only shows limits of insurance, how much is the building covered for, the contents, the liability. It doesn't show anything. And then the biggest, boldest in your face thing is the price. And so that's really the first thing your eyes are drawn to in that marketing. And they do it on purpose. It's a race to the bottom on who can sell you the cheapest insurance, but that comes with limitations and coverage. Whereas, like, for example, our proposal, when we come out, the very first thing you see on our quote is the liability coverage, because that is the most important in our opinion. So the first thing you see is limits of liability and various coverage aspects of that. And then we get into, you know, what's covered on the building and the contents. And then it's not until page 4 in my quote that you see a premium. But the sticker shock comes big. So my first kind of reaction in walking the client through it is, well, at the end of the day, we're running a business, and we both have to agree that that's what we're doing. We're operating a business here. And a business basis is very simple. It's revenue minus expenses equals profit. So you either have to lower your expenses or increase your revenue. So you need to figure out what is more important to you. Now, when it comes to insurance, it's an expense that you're going to have anyways. It's just how much are you paying for that? So let's say this property is generating, this particular property with Stay-Wise, let's say it's generating an annual revenue. It does really well. It's luxury. It makes $100,000 gross a year. And then after expenses with a normal insurance policy, the profit or gross revenue here is going to be, let's just say 50,000. Okay. So after all expenses is 50 grand in profit. Perfect. They're paying $5,000 a year for that insurance policy. Let's say my policy is 10,000. Just double it. It's a luxury property. I'm going to be a lot more expensive. You're still profiting $45,000 while getting a much stronger insurance policy. And to Maddie's point, what she said earlier was the revenue protection. So that extra money you're spending on the insurance, when you have a shutdown for an extended period of time, you're getting paid gross revenue on a specialized product. So you're actually getting back dollar for dollar what you should have made versus getting what's called a fair market value. So when we look at revenue minus expenses equals profit, well, if you're getting less in the revenue protection standpoint, you're going to end up with less on the back end from a claim. You're going to end up worse off than if you would have just spent the money in the investment on the front end on a more well-structured insurance policy that's more comprehensive.
And do you want to go into fair market, like what that means, Nick, for people?
Yeah. So there is confusion between the 3 dissertations in insurance. So for folks listening, you have basically insurance breaks down into the rules of 3s. I've done podcasts with Heather on this. Definitely go back and listen to those to get a little bit further into this. But you have what's called loss of use, which is a personal protection to rent you a new house, right? So Maddie wasn't living in that house, so she didn't get loss of use to rent her a new house to stay in. Then you have what's called loss of rents or loss of income. And so loss of rents is the most common one that we see, and it pays a fair market value for that zip code. They don't just look at short-term rentals. They look at all rentals. So what does a 3-bedroom rental in that market perform at? Well, if the average is 2,500 and Stay-Wise has a performance of, say, in the 80th percentile, they're making more than the fair market value on these properties. They could be bringing in $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 a month during peak season. So getting 2,500 versus what you actually lost because of your performance percentile, you're going to end up losing more money in the event of a claim than if you just would have been invested in the right product. So just one 30-day shutdown, the difference between loss of rents and loss of revenue can very easily pick up your annual insurance expense in one smaller claim because of that difference in how they pay out.
And then one thing I want to touch on too, with a waiver, with a damage waiver, whether it's Waivo, whether it's another company, whether you're self-funding it, you can offset that cost through a damage waiver. You can basically upcharge the waiver fee to your guests, and then make a little extra rev and call it, put it towards your insurance premium. Yeah.
Maddie, how do you factor premium in, insurance premiums into investment pro formas when you're talking to your clients who are looking for properties?
Yeah, we put proper in as a line item for insurance, like immediately off the bat. So it's not a question of like, should we use proper or should we not? Like once I tell them the story of how easy my claim was, how there was no like fighting back, proper wasn't trying to like not pay me how you're expecting like home insurance to be. The conversations are more like, should we do like 1 million or 2 million in general liability? Should we add on the terrorism thing? So I really think like once I tell them what happened to me and like how easy the claim was, it's a very easy conversation for them to understand why we need this and why we need to spend a little bit more on it.
So for anyone coming into the business, then this is and this goes to property managers who are going out to bring on board new owners. You'd advocate that this is something that comes up right in that initial conversation when they're talking about costs of doing the business.
Yeah, 100%. It's just not, we wouldn't manage a property that didn't have proper, truly. And I think as a manager, you have to have those boundaries and you have to like be able to weed out bad clients. Not if someone doesn't use property, they're not like bad, but I think if someone isn't willing to like spend money to protect their investment, they might not be the kind of client you want. Like they're probably not going to be the first to like spend money to like replace a chair if it's broken or like add a blender if there isn't one. I just think it's a sign that they're not really like in it for maybe the right reasons.
Nick, go on, Nick.
Yeah, just to echo Maddie, like there's in the same realm that proper plays in terms of our coverage offering. There's probably 5 of us total in the U.S. And so there's plenty of other market placement to look for. But I think the biggest factor is those of us that are in this space, we're always going to be 2x on average, the standard insurance market. So for a property manager listening going, okay, well, I've always had my buddy at XY agency just give me some rough numbers. Whatever that number is, just start in your pro forma 2xing it, all right? And if, let's say you 2x it and Maddie does that with one of her clients and gives a general idea and then they come to us and we're less, fantastic. If we're a little bit more, then it's okay. It's not as big of a shock if we're just, a couple percentage points above the initial estimate because we're still showing profitability of the property. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of managers that are growing right now and are starting to take a stronger focus. We're seeing it just naturally in our business that more and more property managers are taking a deeper focus on this with the onset of regulations requiring certain insurance, et cetera, to just whatever you think the number is, multiply it by 2, run your pro forma based on that. And if it comes in at that number or slightly less or slightly above, there's not a big shock here.
Yeah, I've had clients too where the quote comes back higher and there are like the levers that you can pull to get the number down to what you need it to be. And I would say the other thing I tell them as well is like, it's not just insurance. Like when you're setting up a new property or even if the property's been up and running for a while, proper comes in and tells you everything that you need to do. Like they're like, you need the pool depth signs on all sides of your thing. You need like this fence lock here. So it's not just insurance. You're also getting like that extra protection on the front end to make sure your property is set up correctly.
Nick, I just want to ask you a question. This is the question actually coming from Justin Ford. Ask Nick about off-premise liability, i.e., dog bites. Because we seem to think about insurance as being, the property itself and the interior and maybe sort of inside the perimeter. What about? Tell us about off-premise liability. Yeah.
I was. This was a big topic. I was just on the Thanks for Visiting podcast, who had joined on Safety Week. And so dog bites, for starters, the data is about 1 out of 5 liability claim settlements in the U.S. is a dog bite. And in 2023, it was about $1.1 billion in settlements from insurance. And it's a growing amenity offering in our space, and it's been increasing since about 2020, 2021 exponentially. So the thing is when we own and operate or manage a vacation rental, we unfortunately become responsible for the actions of our guests when they interact with our community. We have invited them into the community. We have allowed them to bring that dog. They are going to take that dog for a walk. They're going to take that dog out and play fetch with it and do whatever, go for a walk. And so we, on our side, we took the care to eliminate the animal and pet liability limitations in the policy, because when a dog bites somebody, you will be named in a lawsuit as the manager or the homeowner. It's not that you're liable, it's that you were named in the lawsuit, and will the policy respond? So a lot of, back to like, you know, filling in on Jackie's question about loss of rents, when we see the word loss of rents, it's typically tied to a premises only insurance policy. And that means the liability doesn't extend beyond your property line. So if that guest takes a dog for a walk and that dog bites somebody and you get named in a lawsuit, you get to unfortunately deal with ponying up for your own lawyer to defend you and hopefully get you out of that lawsuit. But attorneys are going to charge anywhere from $250, $500, $1,000 an hour to do this. When you have the right insurance product that has the applicable coverage and extends off your property line, that expense is now the burden of the insurance carrier. So our carrier partners, Concert Specialty Group and Lloyd's of London, they pick up the few thousand or tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees to hopefully get you out of the lawsuit. And if you are found liable for a dog bite, depending on your state, other states, some states do things differently when it comes to non-owned pets. You're insured up to a base limit of $1 million with us. So now you might be saying, as I'm talking, you go, well, I don't allow pets. But people sneak dogs into these properties all the time. So if we go back to the social media and the keyboard warriors and the experts, they're going to say, well, you're not liable for that. Don't worry about it. Unfortunately, if somebody sneaks a dog in and that dog goes and bites somebody, you're going to be named in a lawsuit. And at that point in time, you're going to really, really hope that you have the right insurance product in place to protect you.
I like to think that if you buy a proper insurance policy, it's like you're putting Lloyd's of London on retainer as your.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Did we cover commercial grade policies, Nick? Because I know when I was talking to owners in my company, I always had that question: should I get a commercial grade policy? And I've been told that commercial grade policies don't give me the right coverage. So I think there's a bit of a mismatch here in what these terms actually mean.
The standard market, if you will, and I use the retail market as an overarching umbrella to everybody who advertised during the Super Bowl, essentially. They're not really going to sell you. They can sell you a commercial policy, but it's pretty run of the mill. It's not tailored to what you're doing. So I had mentioned that there's about 5 of us out there that have a tailored commercial / homeowners product for these types of properties. So essentially you're buying a hybrid residential home insurance with commercial protections added onto it. Proper is a little bit the inverse of that. We start with a commercial foundation and then add in the generalized homeowners protections. So that way, if it's a second home, you can use it whenever you want. If it doubles as your primary residence, you're still protected as your primary home. So as we see the increase in regulation requiring a minimum of $1 million in liability before any umbrella, it really starts to take this consumer pool down to you really need to look at a commercial grade product to get that base $1 million limit.
Okay, well, Maddie, do you have any comments on that? Is it something that that the people that you speak to, do they know this difference?
I don't know if they do or not, but I am not an insurance expert, like I said, but I was lucky enough to be introduced to Proper early. So if there are those conversations, I just loop them into the email and I'm like, here you go. Like, I feel like I have the experts and the knowledge that I need in my pocket. So I don't necessarily need to go like learn all of that.
Yeah, I think a question sort of for those property managers who are listening, who are thinking, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go and visit a new homeowner, and they're going to say to me, what insurance do I need? Is there an easy answer to that, Nick? Do I just say, well, I mean, up in Canada, we had an insurance provider. Unfortunately, Proper can't operate in Canada, but we did have an insurance provider that we were very, very comfortable with, and we were able to make that recommendation. But I still had that concern, just as Maddie said. You know, I'm not an insurance provider, so how can I advise whether you go for a commercial policy or just a standard policy?
So when I'm talking with property managers, whether they're new or established, one of the first things I ask is, what is your insurance requirement in your contract? You should have some basis of requirement of X limit of insurance. You go out and buy as much property insurance as you deem appropriate, but you need to get this type of liability coverage and name our firm as an additional insured. Insured is the key word, not additional interest, because that literally means nothing. That way this coverage is extended to you. So it's becoming more and more routine that we do see $1 million in what they call general liability. Biasly, I would like to see those contracts be adjusted to specifically state commercial liability, because it is a more robust protection, not just for the property owner, but also you, the manager of that asset. In terms of, you know, having that conversation with clients, people are fairly partial to their current home provider. And so it's kind of tough to have that conversation, like to Maddie's point, not as the insurance professional, on, you know, what you really need to do and look for. So I think it's important for property managers, big and small, to really go out and do the research and have conversations with companies like us, and have conversations with companies like Wavo and with Jackie and her team, to understand how all this stuff plays in, as well as your corporate level insurance. So you can get all of these facets and pieces of this puzzle put together and kind of understood, and how they work collectively together in your risk management plan. So not every owner is going to go out and buy the insurance. And to Maddie's point, if you have a $1 million requirement in general liability with you as additional insured, and they're not able to produce that certificate, then that's probably a sign that that property is not a fit for your particular business and how you want to manage your risk with your growing portfolio.
Yeah, I think the conversations I have too, they're rarely asking me specific questions. I feel like obviously the claim was not fun, fixing that was not fun, but it has given me like a story. And I think when I'm able to tell that story, that's what they care about, to know that Proper is like good people, rather than like what are the exact numbers or what are the details. And then once they're on board with that, then they can go over to like the Proper expert.
I always had a story to tell about my company, because we were sued for a slip and fall accident, and it turned out to be frivolous, but our insurance company and the insurance company that our owners had just took everything over. They did everything, and we were so reassured all the way along. We knew we'd chosen the right people to represent us. And yes, having a story is great. So with that in mind, can you tell us, Nick, just another story of another owner or another manager that has dealt with something that was, to one sense or another, a disaster?
Yeah, too many to name. So the one I always tell, if anybody's heard me talk in the past, they've heard of my client a long time ago out in Washington State. So very similar to Staywise, they were notified of a party happening at their property on a Thursday or Friday night. Smaller cabin in the mountains of Washington, and they took all the right steps. Their neighbors let them know. They went to Airbnb. They had some photos and video of all these people. So Airbnb canceled the rest of the booking. Well, unfortunately, the next night, these folks came in and actually now broke into the property, vandalized the home. It literally destroyed this cabin, broke all the windows, burned the furniture, ripped cabinets off the wall, just straight malicious intent. So we run into this gray area of like, okay, well, how would a regular insurance policy deal with this? Because it's not technically a booking, but it is a malicious act from what was supposed to be the guest. I know that Airbnb AirCover initially denied the claim on the front end. The number that comes to mind after some fighting with my client was $17,000. that they paid, we ended up paying just north, I think it was $101,000 in damage that had happened from this party. So, you know, you look at things that happen in that realm, it's like there's too much gray area to not want to kind of mess around with, you know, saving a couple of dollars a month on insurance, right? Knowing firm black and white, whether it's a break-in damage or if it's damage caused by a guest at that type of level and scale, that, you know, you're going to be protected. That's one of those things too. Like, I wish Wayvo, this was back in 2017, so pre-Wayvo, you know, I wish that client had Wayvo as well, because they could have got some additional funds from Wayvo on the initial damage waiver side. Although a nominal amount, it would have picked up their deductible, and then we come in and take care of the rest. We also had a situation to talk about a liability one, back to the dog bites from Justin Ford's question. Property owner is pet friendly. Guests brought dogs. They had the dogs in the backyard as they vacated the property to go out and do whatever they were doing. And those dogs ended up getting out, and 2 of the dogs ran off. There was 3 dogs total, and one of them was still in the backyard of the neighbor's house. As the neighbor was trying to corral the dog into the garage, trying to be a good neighbor here, like really, you know, innocent. Hey, you know, it's okay. The dog got out. I'm going to try and hang on to it for this person. He ended up getting bit. So calls animal control, excuse me. And with that, the sheriff or police officer also shows up, and the police officer also got bit. So now we have 2 individuals bit by a dog, and this turned into quite the lawsuit between the guest and the property owner and the neighbor and all of that. And it's a very complex, convoluted situation with who's responsible for what and who's negligent, who's liable, what happens here and there. And it's one of those things, like you were saying with your example, Heather, it's just, you got the right coverage, so the insurance companies are just going to take care of this. It passes the buck on to them. It's what you pay your premium for, and let them handle it. You may get deposed, you may have to answer some questions, but you're not digging deep into your pocketbook to start writing checks to try and get yourself out of this, because you already wrote that check in the amount of the premium that you're paying to take care of you in that type of situation. I could talk about claims and crazy stuff all day long, but I'll just leave it at those 2.
Jackie, can you share a story?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's, same to Nick's point, there's so many. But my favorite one, and it will always be my favorite story. We had a client up in Vermont, property manager in Vermont, and the guest had checked out, the cleaners come in, they notice that the dining room table is missing. They go, geez, well, did the guest, you know, take off with our really nice dining room table? I don't know. They keep cleaning the house, and then they find remnants of this gorgeous wooden coffee table in the fireplace. So what happened was the guest had literally chopped up the coffee table and used it as firewood. And you can't make this stuff up. And so, yeah, we replaced that. Obviously, we reimbursed for a new coffee table. But yeah, gosh, sometimes, I mean, guests' intrusive thoughts, I guess, get the best of them. We had one recently where somebody had taken a kitchen knife and just slashed all of the pool furniture, just like carving their names and like insanity. Let's see. Recently, we had one where a guest had left the door open, and like this pack of squirrels got in to this cabin and destroyed the place. Technically, it was the guest's fault. They left the door open. A guest act or omission is what we cover, and so we covered that as well.
I'm always a fan. I've always been a fan of the one you shared with us, Jackie, about the gentleman who was on an extended stay for a construction worker on extended stay, and didn't know that you had to shut off the washing machine to open it to put more clothes in. So he took his crowbar and peeled the lid open, and then called the property manager to replace it, and then did it again with the new washing machine that they brought.
Yep. Forgot about that one. Yep.
Yeah, as you say, you can't make these up.
No. We should have another, like, we should just have a whole podcast episode on just like sharing stories of guests. Yeah.
Oh, wait, we're just leading into the last 5 minutes now, and I want to give all three of you the opportunity to give us, or give the audience, your best tip on, and I know you said, Nick, you can never disaster-proof a business, but disaster-proofing a property, your short-term rental. Maddie, what's your best tips?
Oh gosh. I swear like Proper didn't pay me to do this, but it would probably be just have proper insurance. I mean, like I said, I handle so much within our business, and it's really nice to be able to hand that off to someone else who is an expert in it, so I don't have to spend my time learning about it. So I feel like the trust that I have with Proper is really important and valuable to my business, because I don't have to worry about like what's the best tip for like preventing damages, because I have a team who are all experts in that.
That's wonderful.
We appreciate the shameless promotion, Maddie. I've always been one of yes, I truly believe in Proper. I've been working here and in this industry now for 10 years with Proper Insurance, because I truly believe in the product that we offer. But I always try to remain as non-biased in these type of formats as we can, because I know there's other options out there for clients that may be best suited for them. My biggest tip in terms of disaster proofing or making your property disaster resistance comes in two things. So number one, familiarize yourself with the current building codes, not the code of when your property was constructed, but what would be demanded of you now if you were building that property, which is most commonly handrails and guardrails around decks and steps and stairs, making sure you have graspable handrails, you have preventable barriers from people falling off. That is one of the biggest contention points that we get, is somebody going, well, my home was built in 1995 and I'm grandfathered in. But as Justin Ford always says, you're not grandfathered into anything when it comes to a lawsuit. So make sure that you're following that guidance, or you're checking that and making sure you have those protections, because slip and fall is the number one accident. So preventable measures means a lot. Now, number two, and this is a big one for me, and I think a big one for all hosts and property managers, if it is not a searchable amenity on the OTA, do not offer it at your property. So rope swings, slides with swimming pools or off your dock, diving boards, trampolines, zip lines, things of that nature are not a searchable amenity on the OTA. So by removing your diving board on your swimming pool is not going to hinder your searchability on the OTA, because the only searchable item on the OTA is a pool. They are looking for a pool. They're not looking to be the next YouTube sensation of diving board fails. So diving boards are not a searchable amenity. Get them off your property. It's not necessary. You don't need it. It doesn't increase your revenue. It doesn't increase your searchability. So that's my leave you kind of pro tip. If it's not a searchable amenity on the OTA, just don't offer it. You don't need to. It doesn't change anything with how your property is going to be viewed.
Those are great tips, Nick. Jackie.
Yeah, on my end, whether you're going with Proper Insurance or a different insurance policy, just make sure that you're filling that gap in coverage that is caused by the deductible. There's always going to be a deductible on whatever policy you go with. And so just make sure, if you have a $5,000 deductible, make sure that's filled with a $5,000 waiver at least. And then also, when it comes to the smaller damages, I like to tell people, don't think of it as the end of the world. Don't be afraid of it. Just look at it as something that inevitably it's going to happen. There's going to be accidents that happen at your vacation rental just because of the nature of what it is. And so don't be afraid of it. What you should do, though, is make sure you have a partner that's going to be in it with you, so you know that when inevitably the coffee maker breaks, or somebody spills wine on the couch, or the dog pees all over the carpet, that you have somebody in the trenches with you that's going to reimburse you for those things quickly, efficiently, and you can move on with life, because these things happen. You don't have to be afraid of it. If you have the right partners by your side, I guess, is what I would say. Yeah.
Great advice from all of you. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to, once we've got this all packaged up, I think I might just put a link to it on that Facebook post. And maybe it will convert one. Maybe it will convert one person. Maybe it will convert 10. I don't know. There were a lot of comments on there, so maybe it will convert more people. But you have brought together today some really great advice, not just for Staywise rentals, because I think the Chens can now go off and redo their insurance, relook at it, and make some real changes based on what they've learned today. So thank you all for contributing. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'll turn it over to Mike now, just to wrap up and to make sure that everybody knows how to contact you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much to everybody. And actually, something that I learned, I was with Nick in Vermont late last year, and one of the things that he said is, even though that there may be some areas or districts that the proper insurance doesn't cover, you can still call them. You can still call them and have that conversation. They are such a fantastic company. Call them to discuss your current policy. And they will help you find the right resources that you need, because I think this is a conversation that doesn't often happen in companies, or even if you're hanging out with other principals from other property management companies or other owners of rental properties. It's not the first thing that you sit and talk about at cocktail hours. What insurance do you have? How's that insurance coming along for you?
It's riveting stuff. Yeah,
I know, but the crazy thing is when the disaster happens, that's all you're going to talk about for weeks, months, and years afterwards. And the summary of that tale will be whether or not you actually had the right policy backing you. So if there's one thing I would do to take away from this entire conversation, is to pull out your current insurance policy, get on the phone with your current provider, and if you would rather call up the team at Proper Insurance and have them kind of have a walk through your current policy, I'd highly recommend that. That's the best way for you to actually know if the policy you have is actually going to cover you for all of these different angles where you're going to face litigation and possible big losses to your business. So thank you all for being here. This is a wonderful opportunity to share this discussion. Jack, as you said, like, sometimes people might not look at this as the most fascinating, and that's why we do STIR Crazy Month. All 5 of these topics: safety, sustainability, trust insurance, and regulations, they are considered to be some of the drier topics. They tend to be the rooms at the conferences that don't have the highest number of attendees, but are probably the single most important topics that any short-term rental business needs to be putting front of mind before they get to the sexy subjects like revenue management and dynamic pricing. So I really hope that you have had the opportunity to digest everything that's in here today. Just as a final reminder, if you are an attendee and you have access to our Eventify app for STIR Crazy Month, please take a second to go into the gamification section. The code for Easter egg number 8 is policy. So that'll be the answer to your to Easter egg number 8. And if you are also checking in with the QR code, there's the QR code again, and that will give you another 200 points towards winning those VIP tickets to VR Nation Conference in Austin, Texas on April 27th and 28th. Last but not least, before we close out, a big thank you to Nick and his team from Proper Insurance, who are sponsoring Insurance Week. It's a huge support to us that you guys do this for the second year in a row. It really helps us to reach a wider audience, and also helps us to keep the wheels turning, that we can keep doing this year after year, because these topics, as I said, are so important. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week with regulations, and we're having our expert Dana Lubner from Rent Responsibly, who'll be joining us with a panel, and I believe that is next Tuesday at, I can't remember, is it 11 a.m. Eastern? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, it is next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
So 11 a.m. Eastern is what I have listed down here. So thanks, everybody. Ask your questions in the comments, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Have a great week.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Close out with the music, shall we? Oh, I'll turn the volume down.